Okay, and so now we come to the doozy, the last one, the final installment, the thesis statement. Why in the world, you might be asking yourself, are we doing this at the end? Because we had to. Because now that you filled out the planner, when you've gotten to the point where you're ready to do the thesis statement, you filled out both parts of the planner, both this part that we have here and then the planner from the other day, the critical evaluation planner, the argument and evidence planner. And I have a kind of fake one pulled up to show you how I can kind of arrive at a thesis statement. Now that you've done this, you're ready to answer the question, is the author's argument effective and convincing or not? Okay, so you may think like, I don't know, I guess so. Stop. You do know because you've just answered it. You've spent all of this time filling out this planner. But the thing that's hard about this is now you have to put on your critical thinking glasses. You really have to pull up your critical thinking pants and zoom out and look at all of the information you've collected and everything you have put in these planners and put it all together to explain whether or not you think that this is effective. And you can see right here, um, a brief explanation of your reasoning. Okay, so here's how I'm going to do it. Remember that a thesis statement is always a main idea of a paper. And to get to a main idea, you follow this formula. It is the topic plus the author's take. In this case, you were the author, and the topic is dun 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 Susan Blum's article Ungrading. And really, the topic is Susan Blum because you're talking about whether or not she is an effective author and whether or not her argument is convincing. So, for our topic, we're going to start with our topic. That's your topic. And now here comes your take. How do you tell if it's effective or not? This might be the part that freaks you out. You go back and you look at each section of the planner to help you out. So what I'm going to do, the way that I'm going to do it, is I added in a couple notes in red. I didn't really ever fill this out. I kind of gave you an idea, but I didn't even save the example I did last time. I'm just going to look through. I put these little notes in red to kind of give me an idea. Summary elements you can skip, but I'm looking at the critical evaluation planner, part 1, argument and evidence. And under evidence, in the evidence section, I'm going to look through it. And I'm actually, because you know me, I like lists. I'm going to start underneath this. I'm going to start to list all of these different elements. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to say, okay, based on what I said here, what did I say about the evidence? I said she had a fact. I said that she had expert testimony. I said she used ethos. What does that actually mean? Do I think this evidence is good? Let's say I don't have a fact. Let's say it's all expert testimony. Expert testimony, expert testimony. Ethos appeals. Not including any pathos appeals. I'm not seeing any. When I look over this and I look at the evidence, what this evidence section is saying to me is that I have gathered a lot of evidence about how she's an authority on the topic and she has lots of ethos. So I'm going to go ahead and do something weird, which is I'm going to highlight the evidence in yellow. And I'm going to do it here too. Evidence in yellow. And I'm going to make myself a quick note. Okay, I seem to think she has authority, expert testimony. I'm highlighting it in yellow because I think that the authority and the expert testimony is pretty good. That's a positive for me. Having authority and expert testimony seems good. Now I'm going to go down to the fallacy section. Okay, So this is where I look and I say like, uh-oh, she had a slippery slope and a hasty generalization. So the fallacy section, in my mind, I'm going to make that a green. I'm going to put it over here too, because I want to be able to just see this visually. And you know what? I'm not going to highlight it on this planner. I feel like that might get too confusing. It doesn't matter. I'm going to save the highlighting for the end. I'm just going to go ahead and over on my planner, like I have been doing at the bottom where I'm making my thesis statement, I'm just going to keep making a list of all these sections and kind of what I felt from them. Okay, so counter evidence. And then I'm going to include the counter evidence. And I'm going to say counter evidence. Okay. So I said that the counter evidence was strong because it brought up the point that some students need grades to be employed successfully. This weakened the universality of Blum's claim. So I'm going to say counter evidence weakened Blum's claim. You see what I'm doing here? I'm going to this section and I'm sort of pulling out what I think is the most important evaluation for each of these sections. And I think that's it on this planner. So I'm going to minimize this planner and I'm going to go back up and I'm going to look and I'm going to say language use. And I told you the most important question here was about tone. So let's say that I thought that relaxed professional tone was effective for audience. You may not agree, whatever. This is just what I'm imagining I said. And then in this section, language use, okay, credibility. So I didn't actually Google, as y'all know, but let's say that I did, and I found out that she has been working as like a freelance journalist who writes about shopping and sometimes education. So I'm going to say, oh, her credibility is not that great. So credibility could, well, that doesn't really work with my expert testimony. I guess maybe I'll say she's been a community college teacher for the past like 12 years. So I'm going to say trustworthy as community college instructor, and I'm going to say source credible because, or maybe I'll make it up and I'll say source not credible. Whichever. I honestly haven't looked into Inside Higher Ed, so in a while. I think I did it once before, but I don't remember. So I'm going to say the source is not credible. She's credible, but the source isn't. Whatever. And then for the section on worldviews and biases, I'm going to pull out worldviews and I'm going to say author is slightly biased towards the grading system, which we all know is a lie. But I'm just throwing this in here because I want to give you an example of what I'm going to do now. So I've got this yellow. The yellow is what I see as positives in her column. That she has authority and expert testimony seems good. Fallacies, never going to be good. So I'm going to highlight that as green. Counter evidence. I'm going to highlight that as green because here I'm talking about how the counter evidence I found actually weakened her article. So that's a problem. Language use. This looks like it's a plus. I'm liking her language use. This section on credibility, that looks kind of half and half. So I would say, maybe I'll even do like this. And the reason I'm doing this is because I'm trying to get an idea of how I really feel about the article. If I go through and do this, you can see that I have more green than yellow. This is not an accurate depiction of this article. Everything I'm doing right now is fake. So do not say like, oh, Miss Shaw doesn't like this author. I'm just making this up as an example. When you go to these sections and you pull out, yes, I think she did a good job with evidence. No, I think she didn't do great with fallacies. Yes, I think that the I think that the counter evidence didn't do a good enough job to like upset her article. No, I thought her language use was terrible. When you go through and you look, I thought her tone was really hard to read. When you go through and look at the way that you've answered and the things you've said in each of these sections, it should give you an impression of whether or not you thought these different elements were effective or not. In this case, I have more green than yellow, which means overall, I didn't think that her article was as effective as it could have been. So what I'm going to say here is Susan Blum's article, Ungrading, had some good, had strong, and this is not easy. You can watch me try to do this. But the logical fallacies and the counter evidence against her meant the article was not effective. Ultimately, the author's take is going to be this bit right here. And all of you are going to have some version of this. Here's another example of what it might look like. That's another example. And you can see that in this case, I did bring up a negative, but then I ended with all the positives. And I constructed, depending on what I wanted to talk about, I constructed my thesis statement around this formula, where I have like, okay, so maybe a drawback and all of the good stuff, or some of the good stuff, but the overall problem. You can see that in each case, I'm talking about the effectiveness. So that's how you can use your planner to create a thesis statement that explains how you feel, even if you didn't know how you felt when you started on this endeavor. Go back and look at your planners and let your evaluation and the hard work you've already done guide you to an idea of whether or not you think this article is effective. And then you could leave this stuff or you could get rid of it. Probably what I would do is just leave it. But if you want me to see it, you don't have to. Doesn't matter to me. Whatever you want to do.